George, welcome back to this course on US-China relations, past, present, and future. Thank you very much again for your reflections on what we covered in week one of this course. Now we've just finished week two, where we have talked basically about US-China relations in the second half of the 20th century, starting from the Korean War. And indeed, the Korean War was the only time that the US and China actually fought directly against each other from June 25th, 1950 to July 27, 1953. So the first question is, could this war have been avoided? And what damage did this war do to US-China relations?
China didn't want the Korean War. Mao had just proclaimed the People's Republic in October 1949, and they were massing troops to reincorporate Taiwan into China. And the whole business of economic construction had not yet even begun. Now we know, at the prodding of Stalin, Kim Il-sung decided to reunify the Korean Peninsula. So they moved south and almost succeeded until MacArthur succeeded to do the Incheon landing. And the Chinese signaled when the Americans were moving northwards, not to approach the Yalu River. But MacArthur had ambitions. He fully intended to move into the Yalu River. He fully was prepared to take on China, and the end Truman had to remove him. But that was a fateful decision when China mobilized volunteers to go into China, an event which was commemorated in a very elaborate way over many months in China this year, when we replayed the speeches Mao made, the meetings in China, how the volunteers were called, the command by Peng De-huai, the key battles during that period. It was a very brutal war. And one American said, if there's one brick on top of another brick, we'll bomb it. I remember a conversation with Congressman Charlie Rangel, African American, a very senior congressman, whom I had to meet repeatedly in connection to the US-Singapore Free Trade Agreement.
Yes.
So I had read in the CV that he fought in the Korean War. I wanted to engage him in a conversation. He said, Minister Yeo, I'd rather not talk about it.
It was very painful.
So despite it happening decades ago, it was too painful for him to want to recall it. But it had portentous consequences because
For example,
the US now saw China as an enemy. So the Taiwan policy, international diplomacy, in India, creating a Tibetan, anti-PRC Tibetan movement, encouraging the Dalai Lama to leave Tibet and to establish a base in India, subverting Sukarno in Indonesia, the Pemesta rebellion, Sumatra, Sulawesi, eventually the role the Americans played in Gestapo in 1965. It had huge consequences. So that decision by Mao, it was a strategic decision that to have the Americans on your border would create a far worse situation for China, and so he was prepared to pay the heaviest price.
I'm glad you emphasize how it sort of really soured relations and led to various anti-China actions taken by United States in the 50s and 60s. So what against that backdrop, isn't it quite stunning the way Kissinger suddenly appeared to the complete surprise of everybody in Beijing, right, in 1971? So what were the forces that sort of enabled China and the US to move away from their deep hostility from the Korean War to beginning this period of rapprochement following Kissinger's visit, and a year later Nixon went to Beijing?
Stalin looked down on the Chinese communists and did not think that they were genuine communists because they were peasants. It was the Korean War which won Mao respect in Moscow. And that period, then there began a period of deep cooperation between the Soviet Union and China, which worried the Americans a lot. So their anti-China policies were part of a global anti-communist policy. But the late 50s, there was the beginning of a rupture between China and the Soviet Union. The death of Stalin, Malenkov, then when Khrushchev repudiated Stalin, the Chinese Communist Party objected that while much can be said about Stalin being cruel and making the wrong decisions, I think Mao said it was 70% right, 30% wrong. And that it was a mistake to debunk Stalin completely. And the ideological debate between the two communist parties in the late 50s and early 60s are worth reading. I read them as a student.
Wow.
How, going back to dogma, to Marx and Lenin, they debated each other. And Mao was also concerned that in China, the revolution was being lost because society was re-stratifying. So he tried to break it. He had the People's Commune movement, then the Great Leap Forward, and culminating in the Cultural Revolution. But in the meantime, the relationship between the Soviet Union and China was souring so badly that
there was a military clash.
Brezhnev had a plan to invade China. I was told by a Mongolian leader that during that period, there were almost 1 million Soviet soldiers in Mongolia. Now, mind you, so Mongolia, even though a large territory of maybe 1.5 million square kilometers, has only about 2-3 million people. So the Soviet army in Mongolia had its own factories and farms and so on. Mao told his people, it's a paper tiger, but tactically take them seriously because they were prepared to use nuclear weapons on China. And if China knew that without the atomic bomb and the hydrogen bomb, it would not be able to stand up first to the Americans and then to the Soviet Union. So that became top priority for them, just as nanotechnology is now. Nanochip technology now is for China. But the Soviet Union at the time, in the 60s, was a fearsome power. And the US saw this fissure between Russia and the Soviet Union. And Kissinger being a strategist, China and the Soviet Union, they said it was an opportunity. Mao also saw it as an opportunity because paper tiger though it was still a fearsome threat. And during that period in China, they dispersed all the heavy industries. They dug tunnel complexes below every major city, and they're prepared to fight the Soviet Union.
So the Kissinger clearly saw that and took advantage of it, and that
was while the Indochina War was still going on.
Yes,
and which was why the Vietnamese saw the China move as a betrayal of their struggle in Indochina.
But it sort of proves the point in geopolitics. There's no such thing as permanent friends or permanent enemies. It's all about interests, very clearly. So when the interests of the United States and China converge, as they did, Kissinger and Nixon went to China. But of course, we went through another major revolution, I guess, in geopolitics at the end of the Cold War. When after the Berlin Wall fell, and especially after the Soviet Union collapsed, I guess the United States didn't need China as much as they needed during the Cold War. So what was the impact? How did the Chinese read that phase of U.S.-Chinese history at the end of the Cold War, which was also affected by Tiananmen, of course?
I was not taker for Lee Kuan Yew when he met George Bush Sr. In 1990, January, in Singapore. And despite Tiananmen, George Bush Sr. wanted to bring China back into the global system. And I would say in that intimate conversation, Bush expressed goodwill for China. He, of course, had been American ambassador to Beijing before.
That's right.
And I believe he had genuinely warm feelings
Mm-hmm.
for the struggle of the Chinese people. And after Deng Xiaoping's new policy of reform and opening up, he saw it as being good for China and be good for the US, and so wanted to help it along. And that culminated in China joining the WTO in November 2001. That was a very interesting year because just a few months before that, in April, was the American spy plane incident, which led to a period of high tension for a number of weeks. But both sides wanted to put it behind them. And the difference in April and November, and October, when Bush flew into China for the Shanghai APEC meeting, was dramatic. From China being a threat, China fighter planes escorted Air Force One to Shanghai to ensure its safety.
But this is also after 9/11.
It was after 9/11.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is a perfect example of how events and shifting geopolitical forces constantly affect U.S.-China relations.
No, you're right. The global, one might say that the struggle between the US and China had to come. That confrontation was pushed back a number of years because of September 11 and the fight against global terrorism.
So this is a good moment for us to now pause, and I want to thank you very much for your discussions relating to week 2 of this course. Thank you very much. I look forward to our next discussion when we discuss week 3 of this course. Thank you, George.
Thank you.